Parents and kids are getting ready for the back to school in our province. Now, the head of the Alberta Teachers Association was to meet with Education Minister Adriana LaGrange to express some concerns. To talk about those concerns in more detail is our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, joining me once again from Edmonton. Tyler, some of those concerns are about class sizes and how are kids supposed to really social distance, right?
Yeah, that's sort of the gist of it. Governments all over Canada really have been scrambling to sort of figure out how they're going to make this whole thing work. And the teachers have some concerns that are specific. And basically, it does come down to social distancing. Now, back when I was in elementary school, everyone had their own individual little desk. But teachers are saying that no, well, now we actually have tables that are shared by 2 or 4 kids. Um, and you've got say 30 kids in a classroom, not say 15 or something. So they've got some real concerns about whether or not children, and not even just children but youths are going to be able to actually maintain sort of this required 6 feet of physical distancing.
How's that going to actually happen with kids? Like when I was in elementary school, I'm hanging out with my buddies, we're wrestling all the time. I mean, that's kind of hard to do for smaller children.
Oh, exactly. And I believe the province has put in sort of provincial guidelines about wearing masks in public parts of the schools for kids of a certain age. But I mean, there's no way you're going to keep a bunch of kindergartners apart, or obviously they're not going to be wearing masks. But on the mask front, some school boards have actually decided to go a step further. So as it stands now, say in the cafeteria or the hallways, older students will have to have masks on. Edmonton Public, for example, went ahead and students are going to have to wear them in classrooms as well. Sort of going back to that physical distancing thing. If you can't stay, the recommended distance apart at your desk, you're probably going to have to wear a mask. So, handful of educational issues on, and also some political stuff going on here too.
Yeah, some school boards, including Calgary, have even hired more custodians. Will that really help?
Well, one hopes, I guess. I mean, if you're going to be sanitizing lockers and railings and things like that, hopefully it should make a difference. I don't have children, and it's been a long time since I've been in school. But when I was around, you had not communal bathrooms, but large bathrooms with stalls and things, and every kid was going in and out of those. And you had locker rooms and gym equipment. So I imagine it's going to look, quite a bit different. And that's before we even talk about some of the other demands, which are like upgrading ventilation in schools and things like that.
I remember too in elementary school and even junior high, we'd share sandwiches and share drinks. I mean, whatever, right? It's my buddies. We're going to hang out together in the cafeteria. Now, what's interesting, Tyler, is that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has not yet decided if his kids are going to go back to school.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. He was asked this on Tuesday, I think it would have been, when everyone was talking about the prorogation thing. And a reporter said, "Have you decided yet?" And he said, "Well, no, Sophie and I have been talking about it like every other parent in the country, and we just haven't really decided yet." Now, he also sort of went on to say that this is, a provincial responsibility, but the federal government will help out where it can. So there's that side of it too. And you could do the headline that's blaring, sort of Trudeau isn't sending his kids back to school or something. But I thought it was actually quite a candid answer from a prime minister who has, not been the world's most candid guy in the last couple months, saying that I think it just speaks to how difficult that decision is for parents if the prime minister has to come out and say that, they're still discussing it.
Now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we're talking about more custodians, maybe more teachers, substitute teachers, more help in the school board system. Now, the NDP is actually seizing the moment to demand spending increases and rollbacks to previous belt tightening. But the province is saying, you know what, the UCP, listen, we got to get this debt and deficit under control here.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting sort of thing to watch unfold because, whatever the legitimacy of those demands might be, that, more teachers' aides, more teachers would allow for smaller class sizes, what have you. A lot of these demands are the sort of same demands that the NDP has been making for the past, gosh, well, ever, I suppose, probably, but certainly since the campaign trail, certainly since the budgets have come out. Um, so, I think one could question the motives a little bit, if you wanted to. It's an interesting thing where you have the sort of the on the ground decisions that the government has made that are going to affect teachers and students and things like that, and you have the NDP that's sort of saying similar things to the teachers associations, but it's also the same sort of politics that they've been playing for a long time. So I don't know what that means sort of writ large, but it's quite interesting to watch it sort of unfold, you'd think in some ways maybe that the arguments would change or something, but it's almost more the same.
Now, it appears as though curriculum review has been a hot button topic. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so the Kenny government, the UCP government, has decided to do a review of the social studies curriculum. The sort of general gist of that being to get what they see as political bias out of the education system. Now, where there has been controversy is in the appointment of a review panel that's going to look at the curriculum and make some suggestions. Now, the first criticism that's been leveled at it is it's all men. I believe it's I think 8 people on the panel, maybe 6, and they're all men. So that's received some criticism, certainly. But the a main guy, Chris Champion, has been sort of singled out because he's been writing in a publication called the Dorchester Review, and he's written about Indigenous people and things like that, Indigenous education, and some of the things that have come through schools to sort of try and raise awareness of Canada's past and things like that. So he's been quite critical of that, in a way that I think is probably fair to say is a bit out of step with where most of academia is and most of where the education establishment is at. So that has been a controversy, and it's also bled into this other controversy that viewers might remember from, oh, maybe earlier in the summer, maybe spring. It's hard to keep track when every day is a Sunday. But Paul Bunner, who is the premier's speechwriter, found himself under fire because the NDP dug up columns that he'd written for Alberta Report magazine, which some viewers may remember from the 80s and 90s, a very right-leaning publication, news magazine. And so he had written, again, things that are quite out of step with the current sort of environment of reconciliation. So there has been this narrative ongoing in the last couple weeks that the Kenny government is disinterested in reconciliation, that there's going to be a very Eurocentric interpretation of social studies and Canadian history. And there's been it hasn't just been the NDP, it hasn't just been sort of left-wing critics. An association that represents 60s scoop survivors from the residential schools era has come out and condemned this. So it's morphed into a bit more. There was always going to be a controversy about curriculum review. I think there always is. There was during the math thing, but it's I think blown up a little more maybe than everyone would have anticipated, and it seems to me quite touchy right now.
Now, you didn't grow up with Discovery Math, did you?
Well, I can't do math, so I might as well have. But
You got a
no,
calculator.
yeah, no, I recall multiplication tables and things. I couldn't do them
Okay.
now, I don't think. Maybe if I did Discovery Math, I'd know it.
Oh, you get a headache and it's a nightmare. Don't even try it. Now, Premier Jason Kenney made a stop in Lacombe last week to discuss rural internet issues. I know a lot of farmers and ranchers have had a lot of issues with that. Now, the good news is that Shaw has apparently upgraded to offer proper internet to all of its customers.
Yeah, that's right. So they said they've spent tens of millions of dollars upgrading their infrastructure and can, now offer sort of city speed internet, I guess maybe would be the way to phrase it, to rural customers. Now, this obviously, as you mentioned, has been an issue all over rural Alberta, is an issue actually all over rural Canada, to the extent that the federal government actually has a whole sort of program devoted to trying to figure out the internet thing. And it just struck me now that the timing on that's actually rather fortuitous because if kids are going to be doing some sort of remote learning in the fall, certainly you're not going to be wanting to be on slower dial-up internet trying to log into your Zoom class or whatever. So changes afoot a little bit. And the other thing, sorry, that links into is the economic recovery. Difficult to do business online, difficult to manage your website or something, or deal with customer feedback, all those sorts of things that a small business might have to do if you have inferior internet. So Kenny had sort of talked about that too. Part of the Alberta's recovery is going to need to be, better internet infrastructure to rural Albertans.
Tyler, hospital fees are back. Now, the province is attempting to return to normal during the pandemic and have implemented parking fees once again. Some are kind of considering the timing, it's not really good, and many people are not happy about it.
Yeah, that's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, it always comes up when they build new hospitals, when they're talking about transit routes. The parking fee thing is, I think something that a lot of people maybe don't think about until suddenly they're at the hospital or someone is in care at the hospital for an extended period of time. But yeah, the AHS has reintroduced parking fees. I believe the hospital in Lethbridge is one of those that will see its fees come back. The Edmonton hospitals, the government is saying this is, we're trying to return to normal here. This is something that's got to happen, but no doubt I think everything a government is going to do, whether that's the Alberta government, the BC government, whatever, um, anytime they try and change some of these things back to normal, I think people are going to be unhappy, justifiably or not. I think I'd be cranky if I was going to visit a loved one in hospital for sure. But it's also one of those things I think that it's going to happen. It's going to have to happen at some point. So maybe they're figuring, let's do it now, take the lumps for it now, and move on.
Now, Tyler, Jason Kenney has spoken repeatedly about private health clinics doing surgeries to alleviate some of the long wait lists for Albertans. Now, this is something the opposition is not really happy about. In fact, Notley and crew blasted Kenney on private hospital in Edmonton offering non-emergency for orthopedic surgery.
Yeah, that's right. So there are plans in the works for this huge new private facility. Now, it's not a private facility in the sense that you might see in the United States. You don't walk in and hand over your visa and then they're going to set your bone or whatever. It's still going to be government covered, but it's a private facility. Um, so yeah, there's sort of a big controversy broiling involving the lobbying behind the scenes to make this happen and all that sort of backroom kind of stuff that makes for kind of interesting reading and interesting journalism. But this is the NDP has long figured they have a winner in terms of talking about the privatization of healthcare and the fear that healthcare in Alberta is going to be privatized. They said this numerous times on the campaign trail. They really harped really, really hard on it on the campaign trail because they said their internal polling showed it was an issue that really resonated with Albertans. So now, of course, when we have an actual policy issue in front of us, the NDP is going, whole hog on this. Um, Lots of tweets, lots of videos, lots of condemnation, everything, just sort of a full broadside against Tyler Shandro, the health minister, and the UCP government. So it's again an interesting thing because we're going right back to these political strategies that we had months ago, years ago, and are now sort of coming to the fore again. So whether a private hospital for surgery is a good idea or not, there's going to be a lot of yelling and shouting, I think, in the legislature and on Twitter about this for certainly the foreseeable future.
And I've noticed that things are getting quite nasty on Twitter between the Conservatives and the NDP, the UCP and the NDP.
Yeah, maybe it's because they don't have an outlet, another outlet or something, and everyone's just sitting at home being cranky about it. But yeah, it's been really vitriolic online. That's not quite the right word. It's been very dramatic online. Lots of back and forths. Government spokespeople and issues managers and things like that are sort of it's all unfolding in real time. Like 20 years ago, this would happen. You'd have dueling press conferences or something, and guys would be on the talk shows. But now you open Twitter and you can see people going back and forth fighting over all these things, and it seems really acrimonious to me. And this has not been the most friendly time.
Tyler, the Fair Deal panel came 43% under budget. It's when the government officials held town hall meetings across the province asking how Alberta can have a stronger voice. And I guess there are around 25 recommendations being considered right now that the province is analyzing. What were some of those recommendations?
Yeah, so this was the big panel on, it goes way back to sort of some of the firewall letter stuff. So this is where we got the ideas about the Alberta pension plan and Alberta police force, negotiating some sort of new equalization deal or sort of retroactive payments for equalization. But yeah, I mean, it's a tiny little news nugget, but it's not something we've heard about a lot recently. And it's mainly just interesting that has a government panel ever come in under budget? It's one of those things that you just almost always expect a cost overrun on. So it's a minuscule amount of money in the scheme of things. I think it was 300 and odd $1,000 or something like that. So it's not like we're talking, big chunks of government money here, but hey, someone found some savings this spring.
Yeah, the UCP give themselves a little pat on the back, I guess, even though there's only like 375K. Now, Tyler, the Western Standard is reporting that longtime Conservative MLA, who then sat as an independent, I believe, Lloyd Snellgrove, is now supporting the Wildrose Independence Party.
Yeah, that's right. So former cabinet minister from the Stelmach years, I think, if I have my history right there, gave an interview to the Western Standard saying that he's sort of seeing the time for independence to be a thing. Again, another thing that I feel like we haven't heard that much about recently. Midst of the pandemic, everyone's attention is sort of drifted away from Fair Deal panel, the anti-energy inquiry, and separatism. So it's just maybe a little wind in their sails. There's been a couple other prominent people who've supported that sort of thing relatively recently. Jay Hill, I think, the former Reform Party MP. So, it may be a bit of good news for the independence folks, but Kenny is still. I know I said on the show like all last year that I thought this was going to be something that Kenny was going to have to deal with and was going to have to figure out a way to diffuse because facing attacks from sort of his right puts him in a difficult position. This might be one of those things that the pandemic has maybe made go away for the interim, but one should never make predictions. You always end up looking like a fool at the end of the day.
That's very true. We'll see how it all unfolds. Alberta correspondent for the National Post and our legislative reporter, Tyler Dawson, thanks again for your time today.
My pleasure, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.